So, um, I want you to picture a really specific scenario for a second. Imagine a teenager in a bedroom in Seoul, South Korea,
Okay.
and they just, they upload a 15-second video of a new dance move. It's not a professional production. Just a kid, maybe a ring light, and a smartphone.
Right. I've got the image. I mean, it's a scene happening in, what, millions of rooms right now.
Exactly. Now, fast forward just 48 hours. That exact same dance move, down to the very specific hand gestures, is being performed by a grandmother in Ohio, a school teacher in Brazil, and a mechanic in Germany.
Yeah.
It's on the morning news. It's in a commercial for car insurance. It is literally everywhere.
It's the sheer velocity of modern life. We're almost numb to it at this point, but when you stop and think about it, it is staggering.
We really do take it for granted. But if you zoom out just a little bit, historically speaking, that kind of synchronization is absolute magic. I was looking through the notes for today's deep dive, and the contrast they draw is just wild.
Oh, the Silk Road comparison.
Yes. Compare that 15-second upload to the Silk Road.
Right, because for centuries, the Silk Road was basically the internet of the ancient world. It was the primary artery for information.
But if you wanted to get an idea, or a new religion, or even just like a bag of spices from Asia to Europe, you weren't talking about hours or days.
No, you were talking about years.
Years.
Decades, sometimes. It was a deeply physical, dangerous trudge across deserts and mountains. Ideas essentially moved at the speed of a camel.
Today, we've effectively deleted the whole concept of waiting for culture to arrive. So the mission for this deep dive into the source material is to unpack what they call contemporary cultural diffusion.
Mm-hmm.
We aren't just going to sit here and list what is spreading. We all know blue jeans and sushi are everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
I really want to get into the machinery of it.
Yeah.
The how.
The mechanics of the movement. Because the sources we're covering today, they argue that the rules of the game haven't just changed, they've been completely rewritten.
Right. And to understand that rewrite, we have to start with a concept that, honestly, it sounds a bit like something out of an advanced physics textbook. But it is actually a fundamental geography term.
Time-space convergence.
Time-space convergence, which sounds intimidating.
It does sound super technical, but it's actually a very intuitive concept once you break it down. Time-space convergence basically describes how the world isn't physically shrinking, but it is functionally shrinking.
Right, because, the tectonic plates are moving pretty slowly. New York is still exactly the same number of miles away from Tokyo as it was in, say, 1800.
Physically, yes. But the time it takes to cross that space has completely collapsed. That is the convergence.
Yeah.
And this essentially destroys an old rule that geographers and sociologists used to live by, a concept called distance decay.
Okay, let's drill down on that.
Wow.
Distance decay. It sounds like, I don't know, something rotting.
It's not about rot. It's about friction. The traditional rule was really simple. The further you get from the source of an idea, whether that's a radio signal, a new fashion trend, a political movement, the weaker its influence gets. Think of it kind of like a ripple in a pond.
You drop a stone in the middle, and the ripple is super strong right there at the point of impact.
Exactly. But by the time that ripple reaches the muddy bank on the other side of the pond, it's barely a tremor. It has faded out. Distance basically equals friction.
So in the old world, if a fashion trend started in Paris, by the time it eventually reached a rural village in China, it was barely a whisper. Or maybe it never arrived at all.
Precisely. But today, because of fiber optics, because of jet travel and live satellite feeds, that friction is almost at zero. The ripple doesn't fade anymore.
It hits the other side of the pond with the exact same intensity as where it started.
Exactly. Which totally explains why that kid in Seoul and the grandma in Ohio are synchronized.
Yeah.
The distance didn't decay the signal.
We've basically moved from a world of physical barriers to a world of instant connectivity. But reading through the sources, this leads to a much deeper question. If the transmission lines are wide open, what exactly are we transmitting?
Right. What do we mean when we say culture is moving?
This was the part of the research that actually made me pause. Because I think most of us, we treat culture like it's geology. We say things like, this is French culture, or this is Japanese culture. And it feels incredibly solid, like a rock that has just always been there.
It feels inherent, like it's somehow written into the DNA of the people living there.
Right. But the sources emphasize over and over that cultural ideas and practices are socially constructed.
Which is really just the academic way of saying we make it up.
We make it up.
Well, not you and me specifically sitting here right now. But Groups of people over vast amounts of time, they agree on certain rules, symbols, and values. We build these invisible structures in our collective minds. And the key takeaway from the research here is that because they are socially constructed, they aren't solid rock at all. They are malleable. They can be remodeled.
The text brought up a really specific example of this that I thought was super helpful to visualize it. The concept of the self.
Yes, this is a very classic comparison in sociology.
So take the United States. If you ask an average American to define themselves, to build their concept of self, what's the blueprint?
Individualism. It's all about the I. The blueprint is, what are my goals? What is my happiness? How do I stand out from the crowd? I mean, the hero of the American story is the self-made man, the lone cowboy riding off into the sunset.
Right. But then, if you look at the social construction of the self in Japan, the blueprint the sources give is totally different.
Completely opposite, really. In Japan, the self is very often defined by its relationship to the broader group. The goal isn't necessarily to stand out or be the lone cowboy. It's to harmonize, to ensure the whole community flourishes.
So, neither of these approaches is just human nature. An American baby isn't biologically born loving personal freedom more than a Japanese baby is born loving harmony.
No, neither is biologically determined. A good way to think about it is that culture is software, not hardware. We are all essentially running on the same human hardware, but the cultural operating system installed on it is different.
I love that analogy.
Yeah.
And that's exactly why diffusion is possible. Because it's software. You can patch it. You can update it.
Exactly.
When that Japanese concept of the communal self bumps into the American individualist self, say, through a huge Hollywood movie or an international business merger, those constructions can start to shift.
They definitely bleed into each other, and suddenly you have American tech companies trying to adopt Japanese team philosophies, or Japanese teenagers adopting highly individualistic American fashion trends. The cultural construction is constantly being remodeled in real time.
Okay, so we have the signal, which is culture, the malleable software, and we have the total lack of friction, which is time-space convergence. Now, let's talk about the actual engines driving this today. The research breaks this down into scales. You've got the smaller forces and the truly massive ones.
Right. On the small scale, you should never underestimate the power of just moving your physical body. Travel and migration.
I feel this one personally.
Yeah.
You go on a vacation to Thailand,
Yeah.
you absolutely fall in love with the food, and you come back to your suburb, and suddenly you're desperately looking for lemongrass and galangal at the local grocery store.
And if enough people in that suburb do exactly that, the grocery store manager notices and starts stocking lemongrass. That is micro-diffusion in action.
Yeah.
Then you have migration and diasporas, people moving their entire lives, bringing their home software into a brand new hardware environment.
But then you have the real turbocharger, globalization.
Yeah. The macro force. This is the complete interweaving of everything: money, politics, society. The sources outline a clear timeline here. It's been ramping up since the world wars in the 20th century, really accelerated through the rise of massive multinational corporations, and now we have the digital explosion of the 21st century.
It's a complete fire hose of information. But there was one specific engine mentioned in the notes that I think we easily overlook because we're literally living inside of it: the urban factor.
Yes, urbanization is huge. We actually recently crossed a massive threshold as a species. More than half of all humans on Earth now live in cities.
Which is wild to think about, considering we spent thousands of years basically just scattered out on farms.
And cities act as these incredible diversity engines. Just think about the sheer density. If you live in a rural, isolated village, you might go your entire life only seeing people who look exactly like you, pray exactly like you, and eat the exact same foods.
Fairly exposure.
Almost zero exposure. Now drop yourself into the middle of London or New York or Dubai. You walk just 3 blocks to get a coffee.
Right. In those 3 short blocks, you might walk past a mosque, a synagogue, a Buddhist temple, and a secular yoga studio. You hear 5 different languages. You smell curry and burgers and tacos all mixing in the air.
You literally can't avoid the quote-unquote other.
You can't. You are forced into exposure. And that constant proximity normalizes difference. It drastically speeds up the borrowing of ideas because those ideas are literally bumping shoulders with you on the sidewalk every day.
Okay, so the city is the mixing bowl. But I want to get granular here because the source material outlines a sort of toolkit of 5 specific mechanisms or channels that culture uses to travel today. Let's run through these because some are pretty obvious, but some are surprisingly subtle.
Let's do it.
Number one on the list is media.
Right, visual storytelling.
Right.
And the key point the sources make here is that it's never just entertainment. It's always a delivery system for values.
The specific example given in the notes was the movie Top Gun. Maverick. Yes. Great movie, absolute huge global blockbuster, but look at it strictly through the lens of cultural diffusion. What is that movie actually exporting?
Really fast jets.
Well, yes, jets. But culturally speaking, it's exporting the concept of the maverick, the rogue individual who completely ignores the rules, trusts his own gut, and saves the day. That is a deeply, deeply American construct.
Ah, I see.
So when that movie plays in a highly collectivist society, it's not just an action movie, it's practically an advertisement for American individualism.
Wow. It's like a Trojan horse wrapped in popcorn.
That is a perfectly put analogy.
Okay, mechanism number 2, technology. We touched on this with the internet earlier, but the sources really focus on the gatekeeper aspect here.
This is a crucial shift. The textbook example here is K-pop. Think about 20 years ago. If a South Korean band wanted to make it big in the United States, they had to somehow get signed by a U.S. label, they had to please a U.S. radio DJ, and convince stores to stock their CDs.
There were literal bouncers standing at the door of culture.
Oh, exactly. But technology removed the bouncers entirely. K-pop groups utilize the internet, YouTube, social media platforms to go directly to the fans across the globe. They engaged in what the sources call contagious diffusion.
Fans just shared it directly with other fans.
Right. And by the time the traditional music industry even noticed what was happening, groups like BTS were already selling out massive stadiums in America.
They bypassed the old hierarchy entirely. Incredible. Okay, moving to number 3, politics. Now, this one feels a little heavier than pop music and movies.
It is heavier. This is top-down diffusion. Think about large international organizations like the United Nations.
How exactly does the UN diffuse culture? Because I usually just think of them as peacekeepers or, sending aid workers.
They certainly do that. But they also set global standards. The sources use the example of gender equity. The UN regularly creates resolutions and applies significant pressure on member nations to modify their traditional laws and views regarding women's rights.
Okay, so just to be clear for the listener, regardless of where anyone stands on the politics of that, functionally speaking, that is an external body saying, here is a specific cultural norm regarding women, and we're pressuring you to adopt it.
Correct. We present this totally neutrally. It's called normative pressure. It's the act of introducing a new cultural software patch into a country's operating system, quite often originating from the outside.
Got it. That brings us to number 4 on the toolkit list, economics.
This is sort of the golden arches theory in a way. The reality is, if a nation wants to fully participate in the global economy at scale, they generally have to play by the established rules of Western free market capitalism.
Basically, if you want the trade, you have to take the system.
And the system always comes with cultural baggage. Capitalism isn't just culturally neutral math. It heavily values efficiency, intense competition, consumerism, speed. If a country adopts that economic model, those cultural values tend to piggyback right along with it.
So you start out just wanting a stock market, and you eventually end up with a full-blown hustle culture.
Very often, yes. It fundamentally changes how people in that society value their time and even their relationships with each other.
Which perfectly leads into our final mechanism, number 5, social relationships.
This is all about how we relate to one another as human beings. We really see this mechanism at work with global human rights movement.
Like the Me Too movement, the sources mention that one.
Exactly. A very intense conversation about, say, the Me Too movement starting in Hollywood didn't just stay isolated in Hollywood. It rapidly sparked massive, culturally specific conversations about gender dynamics in France, in India, in South Korea.
The conversation lived across all those borders because the underlying social relationship, how men and women interact, is universal.
Exactly. Social movements simply don't respect national boundaries anymore. A hashtag can travel infinitely faster than a diplomat ever could.
So we have these 5 massive engines firing on all cylinders all the time. We have media, tech, politics, money, and social movements all just constantly pushing ideas around the globe. Honestly, looking at it all laid out, it feels like we're inevitably heading toward a giant blender setting where everything just becomes, I don't know, gray goo.
And that right there is the central paradox of our time. The sources highlight that we are actually seeing two completely contradictory outcomes happening simultaneously. Outcome A is what they call cultural convergence.
This is everybody becoming the same.
Total homogenization. It's the reason why you can land in an airport in almost any major city on the planet and see the exact same luxury brand stores, drink the exact same corporate coffee, and hear the exact same American pop songs playing over the speakers.
There was a statistic in the notes about language regarding this convergence that really stopped me in my tracks.
The extinction stat.
Yeah. It said that dominant languages, like English, Chinese, Spanish, are essentially eating smaller languages alive. And that right now, nearly half of the world's 7,000 languages are actively facing extinction.
It is an incredibly sobering reality, and we have to be very careful not to think of this as just, words disappearing from a dictionary.
Right. It's not just about needing a translator app on your phone.
No, it's much deeper than that. A language is essentially a massive library of a specific culture's entire worldview. It contains unique humor, oral history, highly specific ways of describing the snow or the jungle, or complex family relationships that simply do not exist in English or Chinese.
So when the language dies, that specific cultural software is just deleted permanently.
Exactly. That is the extreme, irreversible cost of convergence. We gain incredible global efficiency. We can all easily talk to each other and do business, but we lose the deep nuance of human diversity.
That is heavy. But you mentioned there's a paradox here. So everyone isn't just rolling over and accepting this wave of global blandness.
No, absolutely not. That brings us to outcome B, which is cultural divergence. This is the reaction, the pushback. When people start to feel the massive wash of global culture threatening to erase their local identity, they very often dig their heels in.
They start building a wall against the wave.
Metaphorically, yes. The source material uses a fascinating case study here, that Amish communities in the American Northeast.
Now, I think a lot of people completely misunderstand the Amish. They tend to think, oh, they're just stuck in the 1800s. They just don't know how electricity works. Like they are just innocently ignorant of the modern world outside their farms.
That is a complete myth. The Amish are acutely aware of the modern world. They ride in cars. They just choose not to own or drive them. They do regular business with outsiders. They know exactly what an iPhone is.
So definitely not ignorance.
Not at all. It's active curation. It is a highly sophisticated form of cultural filtering. They look at a new technology, say, hooking up to the public electrical grid, and they ask a fundamental question. Will this bring us closer together as a community, or will it make us more individualistic, isolated, and distracted?
They are evaluating the cultural impact of the tech before letting it in.
Right. And they decided, for example, that having a television set in every single living room would eventually destroy their nightly family gathering time. So they simply said no to the TV. That is active divergence. They are consciously choosing to be visibly different in order to preserve who they are.
That's really fascinating. It's a powerful act of agency. They're basically looking at the world and saying, we see your global convergence, and we politely decline the offer.
Exactly. And we see versions of this divergence happening all over the world right now. You have regions aggressively reviving their traditional languages in schools, or nations passing strict laws to financially protect their local film industries from Hollywood. It's a constant tug of war between the sheer convenience of being the same and the deep human need to remain unique.
It's a pretty dizzying picture when you put it all together. We've gone from the incredibly slow plot of the Silk Road to the instant contagious diffusion of a viral video. We've got movies and global markets pushing us all together and fierce local identities pushing right back.
It's dynamic, it's messy, and the most important thing for you, the listener, to remember is that you are right in the middle of these gears.
Yeah, really think about that. Every single time you sit down and binge a show with subtitles, or order fusion food from a delivery app, or even just casually learn a slang word that originated on a totally different continent, you are an active part of this massive mechanism.
You are an agent of diffusion. Through your daily choices, you are helping to decide what spreads across the globe and what fades away.
Which is, it's kind of empowering, but it's also a pretty heavy responsibility given that language loss stat we talked about.
It really is. And it leaves us with the truly big question for the next half century.
What's that?
Well, if this velocity just continues to increase, if the world keeps functionally shrinking and the tech algorithms keep optimizing for only the most popular global content, what ultimately happens to the concept of local?
Yeah.
In 50 years, will local culture just be a fun costume we put on for visiting tourists? Or will it still be a genuinely living, breathing thing?
Will we end up as a monoculture, or can we maintain a mosaic? That is a huge, huge question to chew on.
The answer probably depends entirely on how much we actually value the difference.
Well, I know I'm definitely going to be looking at my streaming queue a little differently tonight. Thank you so much for breaking all this down with us.
Always a pleasure to connect the dots.
And to everyone listening, keep your eyes open out there. The culture is moving all around you faster than ever. We'll catch you on the next deep dive.